win a third consecutive MVP. If he was, I think there's a little element of, almost xenophobia involved, because if he was an American-born superstar who had won almost 3 consecutive MVPs, like, say, Larry Bird did, he actually won 3 consecutive MVPs, I think we'd be discussing him like Larry Bird. Instead, we're just saying, hey, we check on him every once in a while. We don't really know how good he is. And it's just obvious that too many people don't watch him play. Meanwhile, you look at his numbers, you look at the way he plays, you look at the way that team plays, and if you had League Pass, you should tune into that team more often than any other, because they're so they're just great. And Nikola Jokic is great. And in this playoff run, he's been better than he was even in the regular season. So I don't know if Russell Westbrook got us all bored with players averaging triple doubles, but he's doing it at the center position.
So to answer the question, good, bad, or otherwise, this is a fine matchup, a good matchup for the NBA Finals, and the deserved matchup after the postseason we just saw, Israel?
Yeah, I do think so. And I think for somebody who has
through decades going on and possibly being at this, in a position to do it again. Look, I just don't understand where we got to this point in the NBA where everything other than basketball, as Izzy mentioned, is what we actually talk about. When a guy is on the court literally revolutionizing the game as we speak in Joker, yes, I will be watching. This isn't good, bad, or otherwise. It's great in my house.
And Harry Lyles Jr., your view of it?
Yeah, I think it's also great, too, for the people. And I would also like to say Chris Mannix isn't the only person that's made this point. Not to defend him, but just as a larger scale conversation. But I will say that if you've watched the postseason, what else do you want, right? I mean, let's start with just the Miami Heat. They were 3 minutes away in the play-in from not even making the postseason. Okay, they make the postseason. They beat the #1 seed, get their coach fired. They beat the Knicks. They go on, they play the 2-seed Celtics. They surprise us all for 3 games. Give the Celtics enough hope to where most people thought, oh my gosh, are the Celtics actually going to do this, be the first team to come back from 3-0? Squat. No, not happening. So you have that on that side. Let's make the case for the Nuggets. Okay, I'm going to make this very brief because I can't believe I have to say this about a 1 seed. They're good.
Okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Harry.
MVP.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, they have the 2-time MVP who, if he starts making his run on titles now, we might be talking about
Matchup good, bad, or otherwise for the league?
It's just about to get good. That's what kills me about this entire conversation. It's like, okay, maybe you didn't watch Nikola Jokic because you've been asleep on the East Coast. Now you're about to get him in a high-stakes setting in which you can then do all the stuff we like to do, that we people like to do. We can make fun of his legacy. We can talk about how good he is compared to the greats of all time. We can do all of that stuff, but just let him get to the finals first. And so, Tony, what this really is not a question about is he interesting. It's a question about whether the Nuggets are messy. We love mess. Like Marie Kondo, we are paradoxical about this. We love to get rid of mess, criticize teams for being messy, but we want mess. And they're just not a soap opera. And we should just be specific about the adjectives that we use. They are deeply interesting. They're even more interesting now because people think they're not interesting, actually. There's a meta conversation here. But the reality is they're not a soap opera. They're not gossipy. And for that reason, sure, they don't feed a lot of debate shows in the conventional ways. But my God, man, you have an all-time great having an all-time postseason about to face a team that's an all-time underdog. The storylines are there.
Linton Yates, are the storylines there for this matchup? Denver, Miami?
If these things aren't interesting, I don't know what is. As a journalist, it's your job to go into a situation and point out stories that they would not otherwise know. Denver is absolutely a place where there are stories abound. Heck,
Size of markets. I don't know if fans ever consider the size of markets when they sit down and watch a game, Israel, but that's part of this conversation, isn't it?
It is, but the humble superstar is also okay for the league. Tim Duncan was that and won 5 championships and created, an organization, a small market organization that is, amongst the best in the league. So, yeah, I mean, the market size does not really affect the basketball.
I've heard enough on this. I appreciate all your take on that. I don't care so much about whether something is good or bad for the pockets of the governing bodies. I want to talk real quick about gameplay here. Nuggets have been off for a week plus. 9 days off. This is an oldie but goodie around the horn debate, Clinton Yates. Rest versus rust. Could the 9 days off hurt Denver going into tomorrow night's game 1?
I don't think it's going to hurt Denver. I just think Michael Malone is too good of a coach. Now, you can say there is the so-called momentum factor with the Heat, but I just fit into this in a way that I think is going to be.
It's just the difference in mentality. You guys are entering two very different settings.
Myers leaving the team this week. I'm not going to tell you I understand it, because I don't. And Draymond Green last week, before it was official, said the possibility that Myers would not return did not sit well with him. Pablo, do you see this as Golden State possibly fracturing? And could Green leave Golden State over this?
So I think Draymond Green knows, Tony, that Golden State values him in a way that no other franchise possibly could. And Steve Kerr said it. We're not a contender without Draymond Green, and Draymond has always seen Bob Myers, who I think is obviously a 2-time Executive of the Year, the guy who architected Kevin Durant, all of that stuff. He sees him as a protector because Draymond has been Draymond so unapologetically because of the support. But Bob Myers leaving, does it signal something about the tide turning on the dynasty? Of course. And I think we're unrealistic if we're not pointing out that Bob Myers is getting out close to the peak of it, right? Granted, they are now a year.
And 3 Nets had 10 days off. They lost. These things are all subjective. I think for the Nuggets, this has been the most consistently dominant team with the best player this postseason. Could there be rust in the first quarter or first half of game 1? Yes, but I think that they're good enough to where that they will get the wheels back on the wagon if they have to.
Is Drew Gutierrez?
It's going to take them half a second, I would say, in large part. And you look at what Miami's doing. They got there right away, practiced the first day they got there, trying to get adjusted to the altitude. Denver's going to have some issues if Miami's, sending some aggressive doubles and sort of reading that initially. But the one thing they don't really have to worry about is Miami, even if they do take a big lead, even though they did maintain their lead in Game 7 against Boston, all season long they haven't really maintained those big leads. They had one in the home game in Miami against Denver this season and lost it and ended up losing that game. So that adjustment that they can make it by halftime. It's not going to mean they're going to lose game 1 if they got a little rusty.
And Pablo on rest versus rust.
Yeah, it's not about momentum to me. It's not about gut. It's not about even adjustments to begin. It's the fact that the Heat just got playing the longer game as opposed to trying to hang on too long.
Is Drew Gutierrez, you agree with Pablo Torre there that this might be the end of the Warriors as we know them?
Not really. I think he's getting out because the job looks as difficult as it's ever been. When you've got that roster and those dollars thrown around there and the amount of money they already have paying their players, the idea of trying to move Jordan Poole is probably something he's not looking forward to. The idea of trying to find a way to keep Draymond because Steve Kerr says he is, they're not a championship team without him, as Pablo mentioned. I think those things all feel really difficult, and it is potentially a reason why they could come apart if first Bob and then Draymond Green goes. But, I think it's just because the job's really tough right now.
Harry Lyles Jr.?
It does sort of feel like he's taking his chips and getting out of the casino because there are a lot of question marks coming up this offseason. I do think Draymond is going to be back because of what Pablo said, that he means more to this team than he. Steph Curry is there, as long as Klay Thompson is there. Steve Kerr said after the Lakers series that he wanted to have him around, that they're not a contender without him. He's going to be there. To me, the biggest variable in this is Joe Lacob going to want to have to pay more than the $400 million of luxury tax that he's going to have. So I think the number is supposed to get up to something like $5 million or $500 million. I think that is going to be the thing that might tear this apart, if anything else.
Clinton Yates.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, I don't agree with Steve Kerr in that situation. I mean, I think that Draymond is arguably the most replaceable player at this stage of his career of all of that core, even if he does mean something to that franchise that nobody else does. And I can see that as being a philosophical difference that might cause somebody to say, yes, as he pointed out, this is not something I want to be a part of decision-wise. This isn't to me a fracturing, a breaking up. It is a natural, decomposition of what has been a fantastic franchise over the past 10 years. This isn't like some big shock, I think, outside of to people people like Draymond Green who need that personal relationship in order to feel like who they are within the team.
28-14, Harry. DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. While Kansas City, Baltimore were spicy names that were thrown around originally, could the Cleveland Browns be a destination? Deshaun Watson said yesterday he would love to reunite with Hopkins.
Card, and they don't play cards.
Great career as a pass catcher, but he's not been on many very good teams as far as that goes in playoff success. And you want to get somewhere, and you're going to the Browns with Deshaun Watson? Terrible idea, my guy, if you're trying to be successful anytime, after, let's just say, October.
Harry Lyles Jr.
Yeah, I'm buying it off of familiarity, but I'm certainly selling it off of anything that DeAndre Hopkins might want. Teams that would make more sense to me could be Kansas City, Miami, Buffalo, and the New York Jets because you've got good quarterbacks and you've got young pass catchers that he could also mentor and be a contributor on a contending team. Cleveland, I don't think so.
Israel Gutierrez.
I'm actually buying it for both players. I feel like DeAndre Hopkins has kind of fallen off a little bit since going to Arizona and maybe needs a quarterback that trusts him and is comfortable with him. And just on the other side, with Watson, I probably know other quarterback that needs more comfort around him in Cleveland and maybe a support system that he would need. So I think, having Hopkins there as a familiar face would help him as well.
So you're buying this. And how about you, Pablo Torre?
Yeah, if I'm running the Browns, objectively, I don't know where else he wants because you did that already. But if DeAndre Hopkins wants, Tony, a great defense, a quarterback who loves the game as much as he does, that's a quote, and stable management, I'm probably, as a sommelier, bringing him to Buffalo, for instance, instead of to Cleveland, because I don't think they're really all of those things.
Sommelier? Okay, yeah. I'm following you.
They
All
grow
right.
grapes in Buffalo.
Cannons.
Buy or sell 2, SEC's unbalanced schedule. This is a hubbubaloo over the 8-9 game situation. Kirby Smart calls it, quote, the most overrated conversation there ever was, end quote. Everybody plays, everybody home and away, every 4 years. Quote, not a big deal overall, end quote. Harry, we've had many conversations on this here hole in over 20 years, but does Kirby have this right? The most overrated conversation there ever was.
I don't know about ever, but it certainly matters in this neck of the woods. Look, for a lot of these second and third tier years, you also might not get Texas A&M, a bunch of other rivalries. So no, it's not the most overrated, but I understand why he doesn't care about it.
The rest of the panel just realized they walked into a college football discussion with Harry Lyles Jr. Israel Gutierrez.
I feel like I might get dinged on this, but I think the most overrated conversation is rust versus rest, which we just had a second ago. And I would say this is more of a niche,
I'm not gonna
overrated
I'm gonna give you points
conversation
for
here. Because if you're coming out of the SEC, you're coming out of it to win a national championship. You're not trying to, avoid people and try to maybe get out with 3 wins. Like, there's going to be great tough teams on both sides. I'm not worried about the rivalries every single year. They're going to be great games. Maybe you develop new rivalries. The SEC football, it's always good. It doesn't really matter who's on the other side.
Pablo, buy or sell the most overrated conversation ever.
So I sell it because the most overrated conversation ever is whether a hot dog is a sandwich. I mean, I cannot believe that we're still arguing about this.
Okay.
Also, the answer is no. The second thing I say about this, though,
Get when you've got a gazillion teams in your conference and people are transferring all over the place. God forbid a team plays once every 2 or 3 years other than every year. This is a non-issue that I think a lot of people just happen to
Harry, you're still shaking your head no. Clinton did not convince you.
No, not at all. And I will say this to Kirby's defense. The reason he doesn't care, it hasn't mattered who they've played the last 2 years. They see the best players every day in practice, according to him at least.
Buy or sell 3, Jeff Van Gundy's ideas of shortening NBA games. Here he is with Richard Deitch of The Athletic on Richard's podcast.
So my most radical one is eliminate free throws until the last 4 minutes. So if you get fouled on a shooting foul, you just get the points. And then I would eliminate halftime. I think halftime is the biggest waste of time, or I'd reduce it to 5 minutes. Go in and go to the bathroom, come back out.
All right, Israel. So we're eliminating free throws until the final 4 minutes, just giving away points, and eliminating